The haunted house at the end of the street. The house at the end of the street had always been an enigma. Its darkened windows, overgrown yard, and peeling paint whispered tales of neglect and abandonment. Locals whispered stories of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and a tragic history that clung to the property like a shroud. Yet, when the Thompson family, Sarah, Mark, and their young daughter, Lily, stumbled upon it, they saw only potential. Sarah and Mark were young, ambitious, and eager to start a new chapter in their lives. They had been searching for a home that they could call their own, a place where they could raise Lily and create lasting memories. But their budget was tight, and the real estate market was unforgiving. That's when they found it, the house at the end of the street. The price was suspiciously low, almost too good to be true. The realtor, a slick man with a practiced smile, vaguely mentioned some minor issues with the property but assured them that it was nothing a little elbow grease couldn't fix. Blinded by their desire to own a home, Sarah and Mark signed the papers without asking too many questions. The first few weeks were filled with excitement and hard work. They painted the walls, ripped up the old carpets, and planted flowers in the neglected garden. Lily, a bright and imaginative child, loved exploring the sprawling yard and inventing stories about the house's previous inhabitants. But as the days turned into weeks, a sense of unease began to creep into the Thompson household. It started with subtle things, doors creaking open on their own, objects moving from one place to another, and a persistent chill that seemed to linger in certain rooms. One evening, as Sarah was preparing dinner, she heard a faint whisper coming from the hallway. She dismissed it as her imagination, but the whispers continued, growing louder and more distinct each night. Mark, a pragmatic man of science, tried to explain it away as the house settling or the wind playing tricks, but even he couldn't deny the growing sense of dread that permeated the air. Lily, however, seemed unfazed by the strange occurrences. In fact, she seemed to welcome them. She would often talk about an invisible friend who lived in the house, a kind old woman with a sad smile. Sarah and Mark initially dismissed it as childish fantasy, but Lily's descriptions were so vivid and consistent that they couldn't help but feel a shiver of unease. One night, the strange occurrences escalated. Sarah was awakened by a loud banging coming from the attic. She nudged Mark awake, and together they crept up the creaking stairs, their hearts pounding in their chests. The attic was cold and dusty, filled with forgotten relics of the house's past. As they scanned the room with their flashlights, they saw nothing out of the ordinary. But then, they heard it again, a loud, rhythmic banging as if someone was hammering on the walls. They followed the sound to a far corner of the attic, where they discovered a hidden room, concealed behind a loose panel in the wall. Inside, they found a small, dusty chest. With trembling hands, they opened it. Inside the chest, they found a stack of old letters, a tarnished silver locket, and a leather-bound diary. The diary was written in elegant, cursive handwriting, and the first entry was dated over a century ago. As Sarah began to read aloud, the story of the house's tragic past began to unfold. The diary belonged to a woman named Eleanor Ainsworth, who had lived in the house with her husband, Charles, and their young daughter, Emily. Eleanor wrote of her love for her family, her dreams for the future, and her deep connection to the house. But as the years passed, Eleanor's entries became increasingly dark and disturbed. She wrote of strange noises, ghostly apparitions, and a growing sense of dread that haunted her day and night. She believed that the house was cursed, that it was a vessel for some malevolent entity that fed on the pain and suffering of its inhabitants. Eleanor's diary revealed that her husband, Charles, had become obsessed with the occult, conducting seances and performing rituals in the house's hidden rooms. He believed that he could harness the power of the supernatural to achieve wealth and success, but his experiments unleashed something far more sinister. One night, Eleanor wrote of a terrible tragedy. Her daughter, Emily, had fallen ill and died suddenly, her body ravaged by a mysterious illness. Eleanor blamed Charles's occult practices for Emily's death, and their marriage quickly deteriorated. In her final entry, Eleanor wrote of her plan to end the curse once and for all. She intended to confront the evil entity that haunted the house and banish it from this world. But her diary ended abruptly, with no further entries. As Sarah finished reading, a cold gust of wind swept through the attic, extinguishing their flashlights and plunging them into darkness. They heard a blood-curdling scream, followed by the sound of shattering glass. They stumbled back down the stairs, their hearts pounding in their chests, convinced that they had awakened something terrible. From that night on, the paranormal activity in the house intensified. Doors slammed shut, furniture moved on its own, and ghostly figures appeared in the shadows. Lily claimed that her invisible friend had become angry and malevolent, whispering threats and pulling her hair. Sarah and Mark were terrified, but they refused to abandon their home. They were determined to uncover the truth behind the house's haunting and find a way to protect their family. They delved deeper into the history of the house, researching old newspaper articles, historical records, and local folklore. They discovered that the house had been built on an ancient burial ground, a place where Native American tribes had performed sacred rituals and buried their dead. They learned that Charles Ainsworth had not only dabbled in the occult but had also desecrated the burial ground, disturbing the spirits of the dead and unleashing a powerful curse upon the house. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah and Mark decided to confront the evil entity that haunted their home. They sought the help of a paranormal investigator, a seasoned veteran named Dr. Evelyn Reed, who had spent her life studying the supernatural. Dr. Reed arrived at the house with an arsenal of equipment, EMF meters, infrared cameras, and a variety of protective talismans. She immediately sensed the presence of a powerful, malevolent force, lurking in the shadows and feeding on the family's fear. Together, Sarah, Mark, and Dr. Reed embarked on a dangerous mission to cleanse the house of its evil. They performed a series of rituals, chanting ancient incantations and burning sacred herbs. They confronted the ghostly apparitions, demanding that they leave the house and find peace. The entity fought back with ferocity, unleashing a torrent of paranormal activity that threatened to overwhelm them. But Sarah, Mark, and Dr. Reed stood their ground, their determination fueled by their love for each other and their desire to protect their home. Finally, after a harrowing night of terror and struggle, they succeeded in banishing the evil entity from the house. The air grew still, the shadows receded, and a sense of peace settled over the Thompson household. In the aftermath, Sarah and Mark decided to honor the spirits of the Native Americans who had been buried on the land. They organized a ceremony, inviting members of a local tribe to perform a traditional burial ritual. They planted trees and flowers on the burial ground, creating a sacred space where the spirits could rest in peace. The house at the end of the street was no longer haunted. It had been cleansed of its evil, its tragic past laid to rest. The Thompson family had faced their fears, uncovered the truth, and emerged stronger and more united than ever before. They had transformed a place of darkness and despair into a home filled with love, light, and hope. And as the years passed, the house at the end of the street became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of family, and a reminder that even the darkest of places can be transformed by the light of love.